I spent $43,000 helping my son buy his first home. And the day they got the keys, my daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "We need some space now, Martin. You should call before you come over. Not thank you. Not we couldn't have done this without you. Just call first. I'm going to tell you everything. Because I've been carrying this for 2 years and I think it's time someone heard it. My name is Martin. I'm 61 years old. I live in Barrie, Ontario. I spent 34 years working as a project manager for a construction company, and when I retired early at 58, I had a decent amount set aside. Not rich. Not even close to rich. But comfortable. Enough that I could help my kids if they needed it. And I always said I would. That was always the plan. My son, Nathan, is 32. He works in IT, makes decent money, but like every young person in Ontario right now, the housing market absolutely crushed any dream he had of buying a place on his own. He and his girlfriend, fiancée at that point, Priya, had been saving for 3 years and still couldn't scrape together for enough for a down payment on anything decent in the GTA. Not even a condo. I want to be honest here. I liked Priya at the beginning. She was sharp, well-spoken. She had strong opinions about everything, which I can respect. The first time Nathan brought her home to meet me and his mother, she walked into our kitchen, and the first thing she said was, "Oh, this is very cozy." She smiled when she said it. But cozy didn't mean cozy. Our kitchen is from 1998. We know that. It was just an interesting choice for a first impression. But I let it go. Nathan was happy. That's what mattered. They got engaged the following spring. Nice little proposal at Algonquin Park. Nathan told me about it afterward, and I was genuinely thrilled. I liked seeing him that happy. He'd been through a rough patch in his late 20s. Some mental health stuff. A job he hated. A relationship before Priya that ended badly. So when he came alive again, when he started talking about the future with this energy he hadn't had in years, I wasn't going to let my gut feeling about Priya cloud that. The housing conversation started casually. We were sitting around the table at Thanksgiving. Me, Nathan, Priya, and my wife, Carol. And Nath mentioned offhand that they'd been pre-approved for a mortgage, but it just wasn't enough to get anything livable in the areas they wanted. Priya was very specific about what she wanted. She wasn't interested in a starter home in a neighborhood she'd have to settle for. She used that word, settle. She wanted something in a good school district. I understood that they were already talking about kids, but she also wanted new construction, or at least updated finishes, and she wanted a home office for herself separate from Nathan's workspace, and she wanted to be within 45 minutes of her parents in Mississauga. The list was not small. Nathan kind of laughed it off at the table, the way he does when he's a little embarrassed. He said they'd figure it out. I could see Carol looking at me from across the table. I knew what she was thinking. I was thinking it too. 2 weeks later, I sat Nathan down privately and told him I wanted to help. I'd been thinking about it seriously. I had money in a TFSA and some in savings that I wasn't doing anything dramatic with, and I told him I could contribute $40,000 toward the down payment. He started to refuse immediately. That's Nathan. He hates taking anything from anyone, but I told him this wasn't charity. I said, "This is what the money is for. This is exactly what it's for. Your mother and I would rather see you get into a home now than watch you struggle for another 5 years." He got a little emotional. Thanked me. Said he'd talk to Priya. Priya's response, relayed back to me through Nathan, was that it was very generous, but they'd want to make sure there were no strings attached. Those were her words apparently. No strings attached. I told Nathan of course not. It was a gift. No conditions. I should have gotten that in writing. I know that now. What happened over the next 3 months was a kind of slow education in how people reveal themselves when money is involved. Priya took over the house search completely. That itself wasn't the problem. It made sense. She was meticulous and organized, and honestly more motivated than Nathan about the whole thing. But I started getting looped in on everything, not as a parent who'd contributed, but as I don't know how to describe it. A resource. Someone to consult when needed and set aside when not. She'd send me listings with notes. What do you think of this neighborhood? And when I gave my opinion, she'd either acknowledge it or not, depending on whether it aligned with what she already wanted to do. When I flagged a place in Innisfil that I genuinely thought was a great value, good bones, big lot, only needed cosmetic work, she sent back a 2-line response. Not the right fit, Priya. Not we. Just Priya. I didn't say anything. I figured it was stress. Buying a house is stressful. They eventually found a semi-detached in Oakville. Gorgeous street, good school district, freshly renovated kitchen. The price was $468,000, which, for Oakville, is actually reasonable for a semi. Their mortgage approval covered about $420,000 after their own savings. The gap was $43,000 after accounting for closing costs and land transfer tax. That's what I ended up putting in, not the $40,000 I'd originally offered. $43,000. I didn't make a big deal of it. I just wrote the check. The day they signed the papers, Nathan called me, and he was so happy I could hear it shaking in his voice. He said, "Dad, thank you. Really. I don't know what to say." I told him he didn't have to say anything. That was enough for me. That right there was enough. We went over to the house a few days after they got the keys. Carol brought a housewarming plant. One of those big fiddle leaf figs she'd been nursing at our place for months specifically to give them. We brought a bottle of wine. It was a beautiful September afternoon. Priya met us at the door. She was pleasant enough. Gave Carol a hug. Shook my hand. She always shook my hand, never a hug, which I always noticed but never said anything about. She showed us around. The place was lovely. They'd already started moving in boxes. There was a great energy. And then, right before we left, when Nathan had stepped out to get something from the car, Priya said it. She said, "We're still figuring out our routine here. It might take some time to settle, so just give us some space to do that." She paused and added, "Maybe just text or call ahead before dropping by." I looked at her. I said, "Of course." She smiled. "Great." And that was it. That was the thank you for $43,000. That was the housewarming speech from the woman my son married. I want to be careful here, because I'm aware that I have feelings about this, and feelings can distort things. So let me just state the facts plainly. We did not drop by unannounced. We had called ahead. Carol had texted Priya that morning to make sure it was a good time. We came with gifts. We stayed less than 2 hours. We didn't offer opinions about the decor or how they were arranging furniture. We were there as family, and we were told to call first, as if we were acquaintances, as if we needed to make an appointment to see our son's home. Carol cried in the car on the way back. She tried not to. Carol is not a woman who cries easily, but she did. She just stared out the passenger window, and after a few minutes she said, "It's fine, Martin. It's fine." And I knew it wasn't fine, but I also didn't know what to say, so I just drove. Nathan called me a few days later. He apologized in a sideways kind of way. He said Priya was really particular about her personal space, and that it wasn't personal. I told him I didn't push it. Nathan was happy. The house was bought. We'd move past it. We did move past it. A little. The months went by. We saw Nathan and Priya at Christmas, at Easter. Priya was always perfectly polite. She has this thing where she's pleasant in a way that keeps you at arm's length. You can never quite get comfortable, never quite relax, because the warmth is always calibrated. There's always just enough of it to make you feel like you're overreacting if you sense something is off. Nathan and I kept our relationship going separately. Lunch every couple of weeks, usually just the two of us. He'd talk about work, about the house. He seemed happy, maybe a little quieter than before, but I figured that was just life, getting older, settling in. About 14 months after they moved in, I got a call from Priya, not Nathan, Priya. She didn't open with hello or how are you. She said, "Martin, Nathan and I have been talking about doing the basement." She meant finishing the basement, which I knew they'd wanted to do. Eventually, the house had a partially finished lower level that they were using as storage. We've gotten a few quotes, and it's coming in around $28,000 to $32,000. We were wondering if you'd be willing to help with some of that. I held the phone for a second. $28,000 to $32,000. For the basement. 14 months after she told me to call before coming over, I asked, "What's Nathan thinking?" She said, "We've discussed it together. We both think it would really add value to the home." I said, "Can I speak with Nathan about it?" There was just a small pause, almost nothing, and then she said, "Of course, I'll have him call you." He called that evening. And here's the thing about Nathan. He's a good person. He's my son, and I love him unconditionally. But he also has this way of presenting things Priya's way when Priya's in the room, and I could tell from the way he was speaking that she was there. He mentioned the basement, talked about equity, talked about how a finished basement would make a big difference in resale if they ever moved in 10 years. All very reasonable points. All very Priya. I said, Nathan, can I ask you something honestly? He said, sure. I said, does Priya know that I paid $43,000 to help you buy that house? There was a pause. Then he said, yes, Dad, of course she knows. I said, okay, I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page. I told him I'd think about it and get back to him. I spent a few days genuinely sitting with it, talking to Carol, talking to my brother, who's always been the person I go to when I need someone to be honest with me. My brother's name is Ted. He's 64, retired electrician, does not mince words. He listened to the whole thing and then he said, Martin, do you know what a patron is? I said, what do you mean? He said, like an arts patron, someone who funds things, someone whose job is to write checks and stay out of the way. That's what you are to them. You're the patron. That hit me harder than I expected. I called Nathan back 2 days later. I didn't call Priya. I called Nathan. I said, I love you and I want you to be happy, and I am always going to be your father. But I'm not going to be contributing to the basement renovation. There was silence. Then he said, Dad, we're not asking for the whole thing, even a portion. I said, I know, and my answer is still no. And I want you to understand that it's not because I don't want to help you. It's because I'm not going to keep putting money into a home where I was made to feel like a guest before I even crossed the threshold. Another silence, a long one. He said, that's not fair. I said, Nathan, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I'm telling you where I'm at. I helped you buy your home because I love you and I wanted you to have something good. I didn't do it to buy my way into your life. But after everything, the least I expected was to feel like family. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then quietly, I hear you, Dad. We didn't talk for about 3 weeks after that. Longest stretch of silence between me and Nathan since he was 19 and went through that bad period I mentioned earlier. It was hard. I want to be honest about that. It was genuinely hard. I questioned myself. I wondered if I was being too proud, too sensitive, too stubborn. But here's what I kept coming back to. I had not done one single thing wrong. I had given that family $43,000. I had asked for nothing. I had followed the rules Priya set. I had shown up on time, stayed the right amount of time, left when it was appropriate. I had swallowed every feeling of being sidelined and smiled through every Christmas dinner where Priya's family got the warmth and Carol and I got the politeness. I had done everything right, and I was still the one who felt out of place. Nathan reached out first, eventually. He texted me on a Saturday morning and asked if I wanted to grab breakfast. Just the two of us. I said yes immediately. We sat across from each other at a diner in Barrie, the same one we used to go to when he was in high school, when things were simple. He looked tired. He looked like a man who'd been having a lot of conversations he wasn't sure how to have. He said, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I said, me too. He said, I think I've let Priya take over more than I should, not everything, but some things. He looked at his coffee. The way she spoke to you, on the day you came to the house, that wasn't okay. I should have said something at the time. I sat with that for a second. I didn't rush to accept it or rush to forgive it. I just let it land. He said, I'm not saying the marriage is wrong or that she's a bad person. I see things more clearly now about some of the dynamics, and I'm working on it. I asked what working on it looked like. He said they'd started seeing a couples counselor. That surprised me. I didn't know that. He said things had been tense since the basement conversation, and some older stuff had come up that they needed to address. I didn't feel vindicated by that. I want to be clear. There's nothing satisfying about hearing your son's marriage is going through a rough patch. I'd have given back every dollar to not have any of this happen. But I did feel something loosen in my chest. Something I'd been holding since that afternoon in September when Carol cried in the car. I said, Nathan, I'm not going anywhere. I'm your father. That doesn't have conditions. He nodded, said, I know, Dad. We sat there for another hour and a half, talked about hockey, talked about his job, talked about nothing important and everything important at once, the way fathers and sons do when they're finding their way back to each other. When we left, he hugged me in the parking lot. A real hug, not a quick one. In the months that followed, things shifted. Slowly and not perfectly, but they shifted. Priya and I developed not warmth, exactly, but an honesty. She's a proud person, and I think it cost her something to acknowledge any of it, but she did. One evening when they came for dinner, after Carol had gone to bed early with a headache, and it was just me and Nathan and Priya at the table, she said, "I know things were difficult for a while. I think I was very focused on creating something that felt like mine. I didn't always think about how that landed on other people. It wasn't an apology in the traditional sense, but from Priya, it was something." I said, "I appreciate that." She looked at me, direct eye contact the way she always does, and she said, "I want Nathan's relationship with you to be good. I mean that." And I believed her, not entirely, but enough. The basement didn't get done, by the way. They ended up using the space differently, built some shelving, put in a gym area. Didn't cost $30,000. Funny how that works. Last spring, they had their first child. A girl. They named her Sophie. I was at the hospital that evening. Nathan texted me when Priya went into labor, and I was in the car within 15 minutes. I sat in the waiting area with Carol for 4 hours, drinking terrible hospital coffee and watching terrible hospital TV, and I would not have traded one single minute of it. When Nathan came out and told me it was a girl, he looked at me the way he looked when he was 12 years old and caught his first fish out at the cabin. This absolute pure open joy, and I lost it a little. I'm not ashamed of that. Priya let me hold Sophie about an hour after she was born. She put her in my arms and said, "She's going to know her grandfather." Just like that. Simple. That was the moment I understood that people can surprise you. That hurts who made you feel small can, over time and with work, choose to do better. It doesn't erase what happened, but it does mean something. I still paid $43,000 and got told to call ahead. That's just true. I still felt like a stranger in my son's home on one of the best days of his life. That's also true. I don't think I'll ever fully forget that afternoon, or that car ride home with Carol staring out the window. But I also held my granddaughter while she was less than 2 hours old. And Nathan looked at me like I was the most important person in that hospital. And Priya said Sophie was going to know her grandfather. I've thought a lot about what my brother Ted said, about being the patron, and here's what I've decided. I wasn't a patron, I was a father. Fathers do things without guarantee of return. We write the checks and we bite our tongues and we show up and we wait. We wait for our kids to figure it out. We wait for the people they love to grow. We wait for the moment in a hospital corridor when everything realigns, and we remember why we did it in the first place. I'm 61 years old. I live in Barrie, Ontario. I have a son who is finding his way, a daughter-in-law who is becoming someone I can actually talk to, and a granddaughter named Sophie who has no idea yet that her grandfather moved mountains to make sure she had a home to come back to. That's enough. That's more than enough.